Dear curious listener, you wake up before dawn on a lumpy straw mattress. Your neck is stiff, your feet are cold, and someone's chicken has wandered inside again. Possibly yours, possibly not. A pot rattles gently over the fire. It's not coffee. It's yesterday's turnip water. Welcome to medieval family life. Love is rarely romantic. Privacy is a fantasy. And if you're lucky enough to have a roof, you're probably sharing it with your cousin, your goat, and your neighbor's apprentice. You're not a person, not really. You're a role, a function, a tool in someone else's survival plan. Tonight, we'll walk through the home you never asked for, and the family that came with it. Just try not to wake the baby, or step in anything barefoot. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe, and tell me what country you're listening from. Most people just watch and disappear. Don't be that person. It's nice to be seen every now and then. You open your eyes to smoke, not because something's burning, although that's always possible, but because that's just what morning smells like. Wood smoke, sweat, damp wool, the faint suggestion of cabbage that's been boiled too long and loved too little. This is your house, or your father's house, or your husband's cousin's house. Technically, it's hard to say. Ownership is fluid, but occupancy is not. You live here. All of you. The room you're in, that's the entire house. Maybe there's a loft above, if you're lucky. But for now, it's just one big, multifunctional box. A smoky, creaky, overcrowded space where every moment of your life unfolds. Birth, meals, arguments, illness, romance, sort of. And eventually, death. All of it. Right here. One room. The floor is packed earth. The roof leaks occasionally, or often. The walls are wattle and daub, patched with whatever was available when the last storm rolled through. And the furniture? That's a generous word. There's a stool with 3 legs, a table that's more splinter than surface, and a wooden chest where you keep your 3 most precious belongings: a spare shift, your grandmother's comb, and an irrational amount of anxiety. There's a bed, of course, possibly 2 if you're doing well. But don't picture anything extravagant. These are not places of rest so much as horizontal holding pens. A wooden frame, some ropes for support, and a mattress stuffed with straw, chaff, or whatever was cleanish and vaguely soft that season. You sleep close, not out of affection, though you might like your family well enough, but because warmth is not optional. You lie shoulder to shoulder with siblings, cousins, or the neighbor's son who's apprenticing in the next village and needed a place to stay. Sometimes you hear people in modern times speak longingly about togetherness, about how the medieval home must have felt cozy, communal, connected. It didn't. It felt crowded. It felt damp. It felt itchy. It smelled like whatever had just been dragged in from the yard, including your little brother, who hasn't washed properly in 3 weeks. And then there's the livestock. Yes, actual animals. You don't just live with your family. You live with the pig, the goat, maybe a chicken or 2. Not because you're a quirky animal lover, but because animals are expensive and thieves exist. Keeping them inside at night protects your investment. So now you sleep beside your snoring uncle and a pig who kicks in his sleep. The hearth is the heart of the home, and also its lungs, its stomach, and its only real source of light. A fire burns there most hours of the day. Not brightly. Wood is too precious for that. But just enough to boil water, ward off frostbite, and fill the room with a gentle haze of lung damage. The smoke exits through a hole in the roof. In theory. Sometimes it decides to stay a while, especially in winter. There are no chimneys unless you're wealthy or wildly lucky. Just soot-black beams and the resigned understanding that you will never quite get the smoke smell out of your only cloak. This single-room setup doesn't change much across social classes. Sure, if you're noble, you have more rooms. Maybe even a solar upstairs, a fancy name for a place with better windows and slightly less damp. But even then, the basic principles remain. Heat is precious. Firewood is expensive. People are abundant. Privacy is a modern luxury. Everyone sleeps somewhere. Anywhere. Servants bed down near the kitchen. Children pile like puppies on a shared mattress. Guests get the good corner near the hearth, which also means they get the best earful of your parents' whispered argument over how much flour is left. Your home is not a sanctuary. It's a workspace, a mess hall, a nursery, a sickbed, a negotiation table. And you learn to move through it like smoke, gently, quietly, not taking up more space than you're allowed. If someone in the household has a nightmare, a coughing fit, or just rolls over too loudly, you'll all be awake. Which is fine. You weren't sleeping that well anyway. It's loud. It's crowded. It's full of obligations and open ears. But it's home. And in a world where weather, war, and disease are always waiting outside, even a smoky, overcrowded room shared with 5 people and 2 goats can feel like safety. Kind of. Your bed is not really your bed. It's just the warmest place you managed to claim before someone else got there first. It might be a mattress. It might be a pile of straw. It might just be a thin sack filled with hay, feathers, or the occasional family of spiders that have laid claim to the southern corner. And you share it, because of course you do. There's no such thing as sleeping alone unless you're rich, ill, or unpleasant enough to drive everyone else away. If you're any kind of normal, you go to sleep surrounded by the bodies of people you love, tolerate, or simply can't get rid of. It might be your siblings. It might be your grandmother. It might be a visiting merchant, or a very apologetic priest on pilgrimage who's been granted a corner for the night. No one's asking how you feel about it. Body heat is body heat, and winter doesn't care about your boundaries. The mattress, if you can call it that, is stuffed with whatever the season allows. Straw in the summer, bracken or dry reeds in the fall. In some houses, rags and moth-eaten wool are crammed together until they resemble something sleepable. Over time, the stuffing compacts, rots, and becomes strangely damp no matter what you do. But you keep using it, because what else is there? Blankets? 1, maybe 2. Scratchy wool if you're lucky. Otherwise, you're wrapping yourself in your outer cloak and praying you don't kick it off mid-dream. The fabric smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and someone else's breath. Because you share that too. There's a piss pot under the bed. Don't knock it over. Just don't. It's not for emergencies. It is the routine. You don't wander out to the outhouse at midnight when it's snowing sideways. You go in the pot, hope your aim's true, and deal with the consequences in the morning. If you're on the outer edge of the bed, lucky you. If you're in the middle, well, good luck crawling over your cousin's legs in the dark without stepping on anyone's face. And then there's the problem of sleepers. People snore. People twitch. People whisper things in their sleep that you really wish you hadn't heard. Sometimes someone screams, because dreams aren't always friendly, and medieval life gives you plenty of fuel for nightmares. And yes, sometimes someone has worms. There are no personal pillows. You're lucky to have a shared bolster, a long, lumpy thing stuffed with straw and jealousy. If you're short, your feet hang off the end. If you're tall, your knees do. You're used to the sound of breathing, lots of it, sometimes irregular, sometimes suspiciously congested. You learn to distinguish whose cough is whose, and whether that wheeze in the corner means the baby's getting sick or the pig just rolled over again. If your parents are married, they probably sleep together too. Not out of passion, but efficiency. And no, there's no privacy curtain. If they're discreet, they'll wait until everyone else is asleep. If they're not, well, you'll pretend to be. Some homes have a bedstead, an actual raised frame with rope supports and a feather mattress. These are rare, expensive, and reserved for those who can recite Latin or collect taxes. For everyone else, the floor is your fate. You might throw a blanket over the rushes and call it a night, or sleep on a bench curled up and cold with your arms wrapped around your knees. The term sleep hygiene won't be invented for several hundred years. Until then, you make do. And somehow, you do sleep. Because you're exhausted. Because you've been up since before dawn, grinding grain, hauling water, mending wool, or chasing a toddler who thinks the hearth is a playground. You fall asleep to the sound of breathing, coughing, crackling fire, and the low hum of someone's muttered evening prayers. You share the bed. You share the night. You share the exhaustion. And when the rooster crows, far earlier than any sane creature should, you'll wake up stiff, itchy, and wrapped in someone else's blanket. Again. But you'll get up anyway. Because in the medieval home, sleep isn't rest. It's just a brief intermission between obligations. So tell me, if no one noticed you in your real life today, will you let the algorithm ignore you too? Subscribe, or don't. But who will remember you when you're gone? Congratulations, you're getting married. Not because you fell in love at a festival. Not because your heart fluttered when someone handed you a rose. And certainly not because you locked eyes in a cornfield while the wind played matchmaker. No, you're getting married because it's time. Because the family needs an alliance. Because your father owes someone a favor. Because your dowry has matured like cheese in a cellar and someone finally came to collect. This is not a fairy tale. This is an agreement. Marriage in the medieval world isn't built on feelings. It's built on strategy, on survival, on livestock, land, inheritance, and bloodlines. Yours and theirs. You don't marry who you love. You marry who your family needs you to. And it's best if you don't complain. If you're a daughter, your body is part of your father's estate. Something to be arranged, transferred, and with luck, upgraded. A husband with land? Excellent. A husband with land and no living parents? Even better. That means fewer people to answer to. If you're a son, your bride comes with a dowry, usually goods, sometimes coin, occasionally a useful patch of farmland. And whether or not you're attracted to her is not something anyone asks. She can bear children. She has a uterus. She has a father who signs things. That'll do. The match is discussed quietly over cheese and ale. Fathers talk, uncles nod. Mothers frown slightly because they always do. Maybe someone consults a local priest. Maybe not. Eventually, both families agree. Hands are shaken. Terms are outlined. If you're noble, a scribe is involved. If you're not, a neighbor remembers the date. Then, and only then, do they tell you. You're marrying him or her. Don't worry, they're decent. They own 2 oxen and only have one surviving sibling to share the inheritance with. That's practically romantic. The wedding ceremony itself is mostly for show. A priest will mutter blessings in Latin. No one really understands them, but it sounds holy enough. You'll stand in front of the church or beside it, not inside, not yet, and you'll make your vows. Yes, even if you're 15. Yes, even if you've never kissed anyone before. The priest smiles. Behind him, your cousin counts livestock. The legal part of marriage is simple: consent and witnesses. Technically, you can be married by simply saying the right words to each other in front of someone sober. The church hates this. It messes up their paperwork, but the law allows it. For nobles, things are more complicated. Marriages can be annulled. Dowries can be renegotiated. Treaties can hinge on who marries whom. For peasants, once you're in, you're in. You're not marrying a person. You're marrying a household, a lineage, a future expectation of children who will hopefully live past infancy and carry your name through the next famine. And love? Love is a bonus, a nice surprise, like finding an extra turnip in your stew. No one expects it. No one plans for it. If it comes later, after a few years of shared chores and shared survival, then you're one of the lucky ones. But don't count on it. Your marriage is more likely to be shaped by economics than affection. If you're a wife, your job begins the moment the vows are spoken. You run the household. You bear the children. You cook, mend, spin, sew, nurse, and obey. If you're a husband, you provide. Or try to. You may not be home much, work, war, or wandering, but your name is stamped on every legal and social matter. A good marriage is one that doesn't collapse under poverty, illness, or relatives. A great marriage? One where neither of you dies of the plague too soon. And if you're wondering about passion, well, it depends. You may learn to care for each other. You may learn to tolerate. You may become affectionate out of habit. Or you may simply coexist, separate but civil, like two hens who've stopped bothering to peck each other. There are love stories in the Middle Ages, poems, songs, legends, yes. But those are usually about not getting married, about longing for someone you can't have. Actual marriage, that's a contract, a duty, a social glue stick. You tie the knot, not because your heart says yes, but because your inheritance says it must be done. And when the guests go home and the wine runs out, you start your new life. Together. In that one smoky room you now share, with the piss pot under the bed, your mother-in-law 2 feet away, and a future built not on dreams, but obligations. Welcome to married life. Try to look thrilled. You are a wife now, which sounds perhaps like it comes with some kind of honor, or at least a designated corner of the bed. But mostly, it just means you've been promoted from daughter to manage to woman who manages everything else. The job description is simple: do everything. Cook, clean, nurse the sick, raise the children, weave the cloth, mourn the dead, smile at market, hold your tongue at supper, apologize when things go wrong, stay quiet when they don't. You don't get days off. You barely get days through. If you're lucky, your husband is kind. If you're not, he's still your husband. If you're noble, your tasks are less physical, but no less exhausting. You are a diplomatic asset, a womb with inheritance potential, a name sewn into treaties like golden thread, valued, but never really free. If you're a peasant, your work is constant, physical, and unpaid. The house, you run it. The food, you grow it, cook it, preserve it, and pray it doesn't spoil. The clothing, you spin it, weave it, dye it, mend it, and then repeat, endlessly, because children grow and winters are long. If someone gets sick, you're the one with the herbs. You're also the one wiping their brow, cleaning their waist, and trying not to look worried in front of the others. If someone dies, you still make the porridge. You still sweep the floor. You still show up. Your reward? Survival, maybe. Gratitude, rarely. They say women are the heart of the home. What they mean is, if you stop, everything collapses. But of course, you don't stop. You can't. There's always more to do, even at night. Because even sleep isn't yours. The bed isn't yours. The quiet isn't yours. The air, thick with smoke, breath, and someone else's cough, isn't yours either. You sleep beside your husband, which is not always comforting. Sometimes he rolls over with a grunt and wraps himself around you like a log that snores. Other times he's cold, distant, silent, and the silence is worse. You sleep with a baby tucked against your chest and another child's foot wedged in your ribs. You sleep light, half dreaming, half listening for any sound that might mean danger, or just more work. A cough, a whimper, a spill, a leak, a mouse in the grain sack. You hear it all. You always do. No one tells you this, but you'll grieve often. Even if no one dies, you'll grieve the moments you thought you'd have. The affection that never came. The voice you lost somewhere between girlhood and childbirth. But grief doesn't excuse you from the daily list. The goats still need milking. The bread still needs kneading. The shirt still needs mending. You become expert at quiet endurance. Sometimes you pause at the doorway and take a breath just to remember what not being spoken to feels like. Sometimes you stir the pot and forget, for one long second, what you were making. But then someone calls for you. They always do. And you turn and smile and carry on, because that's what wives do. No one asks if you're tired. No one asks what you wanted. What you want is irrelevant. What you are is necessary. And if you find time between chores and childbirth and keeping everyone else alive, maybe you'll embroider something. A linen towel, perhaps. A collar, a handkerchief. Something delicate. Something beautiful. Something about virtue. You stitch the word carefully, tiny curling letters, and smile, just a little, because you know something they don't. Virtue isn't what they think it is. It's not obedience. It's not meekness. It's surviving the impossible and still finding enough thread to make it pretty. Your father lives here. Technically, you know he does, because you see his boots by the door, and sometimes you hear his cough late at night, raspy and deep, like old timber splitting in the frost. But he's not exactly involved. He doesn't ask how your day went. He doesn't ruffle your hair. He doesn't sit by the hearth and tell stories unless there's ale involved, and even then, it's mostly about a pig that fell into a well and not much about you. Affection, when it appears, is subtle. If he doesn't beat you, that's love. If he remembers your name without shouting someone else's first, that's pride. If he leaves the last piece of bread for you, that's practically a love letter. Fathers in the medieval household are figures of law, land, and livestock. They are heads of household, but not hearts. They rule, they work, they pray, or they fight. Rarely do they parent. Your mother holds your hand. Your father holds your future. He appears mostly in documents. His name is there on the tax rolls, on the land transfer, on the record of fines when your brother was caught trespassing near the mill pond. He's the one who pays the tithes, negotiates your marriage, and, if you're very unlucky, arranges your apprenticeship to a tanner in a town that always smells faintly of decay. He pays the dowry. He decides when you're ready. He doesn't ask if you're in love, because that's not his department. He walks you to the church door, not out of sentiment, but obligation. He does not cry. At most, he nods once, sharply, as if releasing you from a contract. And to be fair, he probably never saw much parenting modeled either. He was raised the same way, watched his own father work himself silent, measure affection in bread portions and room temperature. If he has a soft spot, it's buried beneath years of harvest failures, tax collectors, and wondering which child he can afford to send to the monastery. He carries stress like a stone in his coat. He doesn't talk about it. He just tightens his jaw and sharpens his sickle. He teaches by example, quietly, from a distance. You learn how to cut wood by watching him, though he never explains it. You learn how to calculate how much grain to save by noticing when he frowns at the storage bin. You learn how not to speak out of turn by observing how quickly he shuts down anyone who does. He loves his children, probably. But medieval fatherhood is filtered through duty, not hugs. To him, being a good father means putting food on the table, defending the household, keeping the roof patched, making sure no one starves, drowns, or marries a fool. And if he succeeds at that, he considers the job done. Sometimes he's gone for long stretches, working land, collecting debts, serving as a levy in someone else's war. When he returns, the household stiffens. Everything gets quieter. You sit straighter, speak less. The table feels more crowded, though no one new is sitting there. He is not cruel, just large, in presence, in authority. If he speaks softly, everyone listens. If he raises his voice, no one breathes. And if, on your birthday, he leaves a carved trinket on the bench by your bed, a wooden bird, maybe, he won't mention it. You won't either. But you'll keep it, forever. Because that is how fathers say, "I noticed." You won't remember many warm embraces, but you'll remember that time he patched your boots without being asked, or when he stood between you and the reeve and told him you were already spoken for. You'll remember the silence more than the words, and maybe that's why, when he's gone, truly gone, the house feels colder than you expected. The boots are still by the door, but they don't belong to anyone anymore. So you sweep the floor, you haul the water, you teach your own son not to speak with his mouth full. And in the quiet, you wonder if you've become him, or if you already were. You are a child. For now, but not for long. Childhood in the medieval world is not a protected category. It's a brief, blurry prelude to usefulness. The moment you can carry a bucket, you're on duty. Age 7, maybe 6. If you're strong enough to hold a broom or herd a goose, congratulations, you're officially contributing. No one asks if you're ready. No one stages a birthday party. No one buys you shoes shaped like animals or hangs your drawings on the wall. You don't have drawings. You don't have a wall. You might have a wooden doll if someone carved it for you. You might have a hoop to roll or a ball made from stuffed rags. But toys aren't common. Time isn't wasted. And play usually happens on the way to a chore. Your job is to listen, learn, and stay out of the fire. If you're a boy, you'll be sent to the fields, carrying tools, chasing birds from the crops, mimicking the men who don't have time to explain anything but expect you to already know. If you're a girl, you go to the hearth. You stir the pot. You fetch the water. You try not to spill it, because another trip to the well means another chance to be scolded for walking too slowly, too loudly, or too much like a dreamer. School? Maybe, if you're a boy and the village has a priest with time to spare. But most of your learning happens through repetition, through watching, through doing. You learn that adults speak with finality, that meals don't involve choices, that obedience is safer than curiosity. You do not ask why. You ask how high. You might be beaten for spilling, shouting, losing something, speaking out of turn, or simply being in the way. It's not considered cruelty. It's considered structure. Discipline is correction. Love is restraint. And your survival depends on both. Your parents love you, probably, but they won't always show it because they've buried children before. Maybe siblings you don't remember. Maybe the baby whose name was never said out loud. Affection is risky. Attachment is dangerous. So instead, they show love by keeping you fed, by patching your shoes, by waking you before dawn and giving you something to do. And you do it because you know what happens to children who wander or dawdle or disobey. They get hurt or lost, or worse, noticed by the wrong person. You know who the reeve is. You know who the bailiff is. You know which adults to avoid when you're alone. You learn the rules early. You follow them always. If you're the firstborn son, your life might be slightly more secure. You might inherit the farm, or the tools, or at least the name. If you're a daughter, well, your value lies in the dowry they can scrape together, and how well you've been taught to hide your opinions. You eat last. You speak softly. You keep your hands busy. And yet, despite all this, you do laugh. Sometimes, you giggle when the cat steals from the table, when your brother falls into a bucket, when someone farts too loud at supper and pretends it was the bench. You chase chickens. You climb fences. You whisper secrets to your sister while pretending to pray. There is joy, small, quiet, feral joy, the kind that lives in between expectations. You survive on scraps of wonder, the warmth of a sunny day, the sound of a flute at market, the rare moment an adult forgets to be stern. You grow, fast. Your body changes before you've learned how to be at home in it. Your voice deepens, or your hips widen, and suddenly someone is measuring you for marriage or training. And just like that, childhood ends. There is no ceremony, no age of majority, just a shift. One day you're fetching water. The next you're promised to a stranger who needs a wife, or handed a tool and told it's yours now, to wield, to earn, to fail with. You are no longer a child. You are a worker, a resource, a role to be filled. And though you'll still feel small, still dream strange dreams, still look at the stars and wonder what else is out there, you'll carry the bucket. Because everyone does. Subscribe if you've ever felt like the obedient child no one thanked, or leave a comment telling me why you won't. I'll read everyone, even if your father never did. You are never alone, even when everyone else is asleep, snoring in their corners, breath puffing in the cold. You're not alone. There's movement, soft, subtle, familiar. Something small scurries across the rushes. Something else rustles in the thatch. You don't open your eyes. You already know what it is. Mice, fleas, lice. Possibly a rat if you forgot to latch the grain bin properly. They live here, same as you. Share the walls, share the food. Sometimes share your bed. You don't love them, but you've stopped being surprised by them. Your body itches constantly. There's a little red welt on your ankle that wasn't there yesterday. You scratched it once. Now it's 10 times worse. You've learned the trick. Scratch through the fabric, never directly. Direct contact just makes it angrier, and you never sleep without sleeves, even in summer, even when it's hot enough to sweat through your shift. Long sleeves protect your arms from bites. Not well, but enough to make a difference, enough to feel like you're doing something. Everyone in the house has lice. Children, elders, the visiting priest. No one is exempt. You comb with a bone toothpick when you can, but they always come back. They like company. They like you. You'd be flattered, but your scalp is bleeding. As for the bedbugs, they arrive without ceremony and stay long past eviction. You don't see them much. You feel them. And the feeling is humiliation in the shape of heat and itch. You share your sleeping space with these things. It's not a matter of cleanliness. You are clean as a person who bathes when the season permits and scrubs with sand and ash can be. But the house has its own logic, and it does not care about your pride. The walls are wattle and daub. The thatch roof leaks when it rains and houses birds that drop things you'd rather not think about. The floor is dirt, sprinkled with rushes. The rushes absorb most of the smells, including chamber pot accidents, goat droppings, and the fish that fell behind the bench last week and mysteriously vanished. Air comes in through the cracks in the door, the gaps in the beams, the seams around the shutter that never quite closes. Drafts are permanent residents. You stop chasing them. You just sleep curled up. And smoke? Smoke is the flavor of home. Most households don't have chimneys, just a hole in the roof if you're lucky, and a prayer that the wind cooperates. When it doesn't, and it rarely does, the entire room fills with a low gray haze. It stings the eyes, clogs the throat, and settles in your hair. Your clothing smells like smoke. Your bread tastes like smoke. You start to think in shades of ash. You can open a door, but that just lets in more cold, and maybe a goose. So you sit near the hearth, eyes watering, head throbbing, and act like everything's normal. Because it is. Sometimes when the fire crackles just right and the wind behaves, the room clears a little. You can see your sister's face clearly across the fire. You nod. She nods back. That's what passes for a peaceful evening. You love your family. You really do. But the fleas love you more. They don't argue. They don't interrupt. They simply take what they want and keep you awake, scratching your calves at 3 a.m. And yes, there are ways to try and stop them. Hanging herbs in the rafters, washing with vinegar, sleeping with your head wrapped tight. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just makes you smell like seasoned firewood. But you endure. You always endure. Because comfort is not guaranteed. Cleanliness is a negotiation. And the only privacy you get is when the lice decide to skip your neck and move to your sister's instead. Eventually, you fall asleep. Not because it's peaceful, it isn't, but because exhaustion outweighs discomfort. And when you wake up itchy, stiff, and coughing from smoke that's already been burning since before dawn, you start the day knowing you'll share it with everyone. Family, fire, fleas. Your marriage is not just between you and your spouse. It's also between you, your spouse, the priest, a few saints, a long list of dead relatives, and an ever-watchful God who absolutely has opinions about how you sleep, pray, and make babies. Because in the medieval world, marriage isn't just a legal or social arrangement. It's a sacrament, a holy union, a divine obligation. And if it doesn't feel particularly romantic, that's because it was never designed to be. The church wants you to love one another, eventually. But first it wants order, rules, boundaries, A proper exchange of vows. No cousin kissing, no goats at the ceremony. Marriage is sacred, which means naturally it is regulated. A priest must witness the vows, ideally outside the church doors. Your union is announced publicly, not for celebration, but so anyone who knows a reason you shouldn't be married can interrupt. Like, say, you're actually related. Because here's the thing, everyone's related. Medieval villages are small, travel is limited, families intermarry for generations. The church tries to prevent incest with canonical laws, forbidding marriages within 7 degrees of kinship at one point. Later they relax it to 4. Still too strict. A nightmare to enforce. Nobody's quite sure what counts as a 4th cousin twice removed, but someone's definitely drawing a family tree in the margins of the prayer book. Of course, you don't feel related to your betrothed, but if your great-grandmother's brother's wife was their grandfather's niece, well, too bad. That's consanguinity. Fortunately, dispensations can be granted for a fee and a wink. So you get married. You promise to stay faithful, raise children, and confess regularly. The church now owns a stake in your domestic life. You are no longer just a spouse. You are part of the divine structure, a holy home. And the rules don't stop at the altar. You must obey your husband. He must not beat you too much. You may only engage in conjugal acts for procreation, preferably on your back, on holy days excluded. Desire is frowned upon. Lust is a sin, even with your own spouse. So, no smiling, no giggling, and absolutely no doing that thing you overheard the baker's wife whispering about. Confession is mandatory, weekly if possible. You shuffle into the church and murmur sins you're not even sure count. You quarreled, you muttered, you enjoyed something. That's 3 Hail Marys and a stern look. And don't even think about skipping Mass. The priest notices. Your neighbors notice. God notices. You may not be literate, but you are being watched. Even what you name your children is under church purview. Saints' names are preferred. Exotic or pagan names raise eyebrows and possibly suspicions. Your household must be orderly, modest, reverent. No gossip, no drunkenness, no spontaneous dancing. And if your neighbor runs off with a stable boy, well, you're encouraged to report it. Not because you're nosy, but because you care about souls. That's what the church says. And you nod along because nodding is safer than asking questions. But in private, you wonder. You wonder if God really cares about bed sheets, if saints truly monitor wedding bands, if heaven frowns when your husband snores so loudly you have to sleep on the floor. You wonder why a divine plan includes so much laundry. Still, you obey. Mostly. You confess. You kneel. You fold your hands even when they're cracked and bleeding. You do your best. You love or try to. You forgive or fake it. Because somewhere beneath the sermons and the smoke and the lice and the guilt, you hope there's holiness. That maybe your effort counts for something. That maybe patience is sacred. That maybe the chaos of family can, somehow, be part of grace. And when your child smiles for the first time, or your husband hands you a pear without being asked, you feel it. A quiet warmth, not divine thunder, not angel choirs, just the small miracle of shared survival. And you think, maybe that's what the church meant all along. One day, you'll die. Let's start there, not dramatically, not even particularly early by medieval standards. But it will happen. Probably after a long winter, 3 separate coughs that never went away, and one final muttered prayer from someone pretending to like you. And when that day comes, what will matter most? Not your virtues, not your sacrifices, not even your favorite cow. What matters is land. Who gets it, and who's about to pretend they deserve it. Because in medieval society, land is power. Land feeds mouths. Land settles debts. Land is the family legacy. And legacy, as it turns out, is mostly about property and bitterness. If you're a firstborn son, congratulations. The world has already decided you're special. The land is yours. The house, the tools, the mule with the limp, all of it. This isn't because you're particularly gifted. It's because you were born early and someone had to get everything. Splitting land between children weakens family holdings, so instead they just give it all to you and trust that you'll look after your siblings. Spoiler, you probably won't. If you're a second-born son, you don't get land. You get Latin. Your future lies in the church, or if the abbey is full, perhaps in law or clerical service. Either way, you'll wear robes and pretend not to be bitter. And if you're a third son, well, you get creative. You might marry up, enlist in someone else's army, or become the sort of man who lingers at taverns offering unsolicited opinions about land management. You won't inherit, but you will inherit feelings about not inheriting. And if you're a daughter, let's just say your value peaks during marriage negotiations. You might receive a dowry, linens, a cow, maybe a corner of land no one wanted, but usually only if the family can spare it. The real prize is marrying you off strategically. If you're lucky, you get a husband who doesn't gamble. If you're not, you become someone's regret wrapped in a veil. Some daughters enter convents, not always by choice. Some stay at home to care for aging parents, slowly transforming into unpaid domestic staff with sentimental nicknames. Now, about that will. It's not a comfortable topic, but it's necessary, because when you die, people will fight over what you left behind, even if what you left behind is mostly debts and a comb with missing teeth. Wills are sacred documents, also suspiciously flexible. You can't write much yourself, but you know a clerk. He'll jot it down in Latin. You'll nod gravely and pretend to understand it. He'll include your sons, your nephews, the church, and, if you're feeling charitable, your wife. Though technically, she can't inherit land unless the law really likes her. You sign the will. A few witnesses nod solemnly. You fold it, tuck it under your bed, and hope nobody moves it. Then you spend your last days repeating your wishes to anyone who'll listen, just in case. Because after you're gone, it begins, the family feud. Your eldest son says he was promised the east field. Your second son insists you meant for him to have the cow. Your widow insists she was told she could keep the spinning wheel, but that may have been delirium. Neighbors gossip. The priest squints at the document. Someone starts counting chickens like they're gold. There is yelling, possibly legal threats. Someone definitely brings up that thing you did 20 years ago with the boundary stones. In some cases, it gets violent, blades drawn, doors barred, sheep stolen out of spite. In most cases, it just drags on. Quiet bitterness passed down like heirlooms. And you're not here to fix it. You're buried with your woolen shroud and your questionable choices. But even underground, you suspect something's gone wrong. Maybe it's the sound of your name being used in vain. Maybe it's the eerie silence between your sons. Maybe it's the fact that no one can find the will, except for your cousin, who just remembered it was left in his care and is now waving a fresh copy around with suspicious ink. And you lie there thinking, I should have just sold the field and given everyone a chicken. But it's too late now. The feud has begun. And in 100 years, someone will still say your name with a sigh, not because they miss you, but because your decisions are why the family doesn't talk anymore. There's always something to do, and none of it is optional. The fire needs tending, the child needs feeding, the chickens need herding. Again, because they refuse to respect boundaries. The stew is boiling too fast, the thread has knotted again, and the baby is teething through what feels like an exorcism. And somehow, it's all your job. You're not the head of the household, but you are the hands, the back, the spine, the one who keeps it all from collapsing under its own hunger. You wake up before everyone else. You go to sleep after they do. Or rather, you try to sleep. While the baby fusses, the smoke stings your throat, and someone beside you is snoring directly into your soul. There's always something to scrub. Your hands are cracked from lye. Your fingernails are stained with onion and ash. You've worn the same gown for 5 days, and it still smells better than your husband's boots. You mend things that will tear again tomorrow. You stir pots that barely feed 5 mouths. You patch thatch with a child strapped to your back, because the hole in the roof won't wait for him to wean. You do this without applause. No one thanks the woman who boiled the lice out of the family's tunics. No one commemorates the night you slept on the floor beside a sick toddler, changing rags and praying under your breath. Your work is silent, endless, expected. You are a wife, a mother, a midwife, a nurse, a tailor, a cook, and, occasionally, the closest thing to a priest when your child is choking, and the actual priest is 3 miles away. Daughters don't grow up slowly. They graduate straight from child to servant, then from servant to mother. There is no pause in between. If you are lucky, you get a few years of girlhood with wooden toys and wool braids. If not, you're handed a spindle and a sibling before your hips have even widened. And still, you make do. You hum songs while you stir. You whisper jokes while you sew. You teach your daughter how to keep her stitches even and her voice quiet. You fold linens with care. You stack herbs in the window for drying. You hang the laundry even when the wind tears it loose again, because someone has to. You don't have the luxury of dreaming, but in the quiet moments, when everyone's fed and the baby's asleep, you let yourself wonder, what would it feel like to rest, to sit still and know no one will call your name, to eat a full meal without jumping up 3 times, to wear something beautiful just because? You wouldn't even know what to do with yourself. Still, you imagine it. A warm bath, a day without dirt under your nails, a smile that isn't forced through fatigue. But the baby coughs, the fire crackles wrong, someone is shouting for you. So you get up, again. Because medieval domestic life doesn't pause for poetry, even when you're bleeding from childbirth. Even when you're mourning a miscarriage no one will talk about. Even when your back aches so badly, you have to bend like a question mark just to sweep the floor. You don't have time for grief, so you tuck it into your sleeve, carry it with the laundry, stir it into the stew, invisible, but always there. You know which herbs help with cramping. You know how to soothe a child's fever. You know how to keep the bread from collapsing and how to hide bruises from inquisitive neighbors. You've learned not to flinch when your name is shouted, not to cry when the mending pile falls over, not to hope someone else will volunteer to help. They won't, so you just do it, again. And tomorrow, you'll do it again, not because you're thanked, not because you're recognized, but because if you don't, who will? And maybe, just maybe, your daughter will notice. She'll remember how you kept the fire going, how you wiped her brow, how you stitched her hem when she was too tired to try. She'll grow into your role without ever being taught, because she's been watching all along. And in that quiet legacy, not written in wills or chiseled on stones, you survive. Your love is in the labor. Your devotion is in the doing. Your strength is in the fact that you never, ever stop. It's bedtime. Not that this means anything as romantic as peace or rest. It just means that the labor of the day is done, and the labor of surviving the night begins. You start with the candle. Only one. Beeswax if you're lucky, tallow if you're not. The flame flickers weakly, casting long shadows against the rough walls. Someone mutters a prayer as they snuff it, not because they're particularly pious, but because you never know what might crawl in while you sleep. Wolves? Possible. Fires? Likely. Drafts? Guaranteed. You huddle near the hearth with the others, family, servants, a neighbor's apprentice who hasn't left yet. Blankets are laid out, if you have them. More likely, it's cloaks, old wool, and the lingering heat of proximity. The cold creeps in anyway. Through the floor, through the roof, through the gap under the door where last week's chicken tried to escape. You pull your knees up to your chest and bury your feet under someone else's tunic. They grumble, but don't move. Everyone's cold. You hope the fire doesn't go out, but you also hope the house doesn't burn down, because those are your two options. Medieval homes are made of timber and straw, and whatever flammable optimism was left lying around. The hearth is the heart of the home, and its biggest risk. Sometimes you lie awake listening, not for burglars, not even for rats, but for the creak of the beams above your head. That sound, you tell yourself, is just settling and not about to collapse in flames. It's not fear exactly. It's preparation. A way of living that never assumes safety. Someone starts snoring, loudly. It's your uncle, or maybe your cousin. It's hard to tell. You're all packed together like spoons in a drawer, with limbs overlapping and breath fogging the air. The nightshirt you're wearing is scratchy and borrowed. You share it with your sister. She gets it on even days. You get it on odd ones. Laundry day is divine intervention. You roll over. The floor pokes your hip. A flea bites your ankle. The straw mat rustles underneath. You whisper another prayer, just in case the first one wasn't enough. The baby stirs and lets out a noise somewhere between a grunt and a wail. You freeze. If he wakes fully, no one's sleeping. His mother pats his back rhythmically. You count the motions. You count the seconds. You wait for silence to settle again, like ash after the fire. It never fully does. There's always a sound, a drip, a cough, someone muttering in their sleep. The room breathes with you, warm in places, freezing in others. You shift again. You've ended up under someone's elbow, possibly your father's, possibly the neighbor's apprentice. You don't have the energy to care. You remember when you used to have a bed all to yourself, briefly, before the last sibling was born, before the pig got sick and had to be kept inside, before the leak in the ceiling made the other corner of the room uninhabitable. Now you share everything, including your breath. You try not to think about it. Instead, you count the things around you. 1 clay pot cooling on the hearth, 2 socks near the fire, drying hopefully, 3 pairs of legs touching yours, 4 blisters on your right foot, 5 prayers you mumbled today that probably didn't count. Outside, the wind howls. It rattles the shutters. You imagine a wolf, or a thief, or something worse, but you don't get up to check. If something's out there, it'll find you regardless. Inside, someone shifts. The whole room adjusts around them like a living thing. You smell smoke, sweat, wool, and the faint sour tang of cabbage stew from dinner. You stop trying to sleep. Instead, you just lie there, listening, breathing, waiting for morning, when it'll all start again. The moment the sun breaks the horizon, the baby will cry. Someone will groan. Someone else will fart. You'll sit up stiffly, rub your eyes, start poking the embers back to life. Another day, another round of labor and lice. But for now, you lie still, blanketed by noise, wrapped in the warmth of people you love, or at least tolerate. And you think, just for a moment, if the house burns down, at least it'll be warmer for a minute. The child dies at dawn. The fire has already been lit, the bread already rising, the animals already fed. You feel the cold before the silence, the small body curled beside you, too still. The breath you're waiting for doesn't come, but the day does. So you get up, you stir the porridge, you call your husband in from the field, you wrap the baby in linen you were saving for a winter tunic. You weep, briefly, quietly. There's a funeral to arrange, and supper to cook, because grief doesn't cancel chores. In fact, it adds to them. You sew the shroud. You prepare the body. You sweep the floor in case the priest comes early. Mourning, like everything else, is a duty. You wear black if you have it, or dark gray, or just the same dress you always wear, but with your headscarf pulled low. People will come. They'll say, God's will. They'll murmur, such a loss. Someone will bring bread. Someone else will ask about the piglets. No one will offer to do the laundry. You will cry into your sleeve while scrubbing ashes from the pot. You will whisper your child's name while winding wool, and you will not stop, because you can't. There are mouths to feed, clothes to mend, a floor that refuses to stay clean. Even in grief, your hands stay busy. They have to. And if it's your husband who dies, well, that's different. You sew his shroud too. You set out his cup and realize you still expect him to drink from it. You answer the priest's questions and thank your neighbors for their condolences. You serve food at your own mourning table, and you try not to flinch when someone asks, "What will you do now?" Because everyone knows the answer. You'll remarry, not because you're ready, not because you want to, but because a widow with children and no land is an administrative burden, not a person. You might get 6 months, maybe a year. But by the next harvest, someone will make a suggestion. A neighbor's cousin, a cousin's brother, a man who owns a little land and only hits his goats. You say yes, or you say nothing, and someone else says yes for you. You pack up the cup, fold the dress, teach your children to call someone else father. And you keep spinning, because even in grief, especially in grief, the work continues. Your body is not allowed to stop. Your role doesn't dissolve. There are no sympathy days, no isolation, no rest. If you are noble, your mourning comes with etiquette. You wear black veils. You attend mass. You write letters. You speak softly for a prescribed number of weeks. Then you marry again, because alliances don't grieve. If you are poor, mourning is whatever you can afford. A wool shawl, a few days of dry bread, a whispered name before bed. The world keeps moving, and it expects you to keep pace. You might cry while carding fleece. You might hum lullabies to no one. You might see your child's face in a puddle or hear your husband's voice in a distant bell. But you don't get to fall apart. Not here. Not now. Someone needs help with the fire. Someone needs their hem stitched. Someone needs you. because you are the center of the house, the hinge on which everything swings. Your grief is real, but invisible. It's folded into the linens, pressed into the bread, scrubbed into the floorboards. No one writes poems about it. No one sings laments. But it's there, in every stitch, every sigh, every time you straighten your shoulders and say, "It's all right," even when it's not. And when you bury a second child, or a second husband, or your mother, or your hope, you don't wear grief like a badge. You wear it like an apron, stained and daily, always tied on, because someone has to, and it has always been you. History wasn't written by women like you. It was scrubbed with you. If you're still listening, quietly, like always, maybe tonight you subscribe, not for content, but so someone, somewhere, sees the shape of a woman who didn't vanish. Let's talk about family, or rather, let's talk about the people you eat with, sleep beside, shout at, borrow spoons from, and occasionally forget aren't technically your relatives. Because in the medieval world, family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who lives under your roof, and sometimes who owns it. Your household might include your parents, your siblings, a few surviving grandparents, and several children. So far, so predictable. But it also includes your husband's illegitimate cousin who works as a pig boy, a widowed aunt who never left after her husband died 6 winters ago, 3 apprentices with no known surnames, a traveling monk who just needs somewhere to stay for a few days, and a servant girl who may or may not be your niece, depending on who you ask. You may not know how you're related to half the people in your own home, but you do know what they smell like, because everyone shares everything: space, food, labor, and yes, lice. If you're noble, your household is larger. You have servants, stewards, tutors, wet nurses, a scribe, a cook, a groom for the horses, a second cook just for fish. Half of them are probably your in-laws. The other half are here because their parents owed your father something 20 years ago, and now they live in the attic. If you're poor, your household is smaller, but not by much. Because when a cousin loses her home, she moves in with you. When a neighbor's child is orphaned, she becomes your apprentice. When your brother remarries, his new wife brings her own children, and possibly her mother, who now sleeps by the hearth and criticizes your stitching. The medieval home is not a nuclear family. It's a crowded room of obligation, inheritance, and people trying not to step on each other's wooden clogs. Stepchildren, common. Blended families were the norm. When people die young, they remarry fast, so you might be a 10-year-old with 5 half-siblings, 2 stepbrothers, and 1 girl who just keeps showing up at mealtimes. And you all sleep in the same room. Not because you like each other, but because that's what the house holds. If you're lucky, there's a loft. If you're very lucky, the loft isn't full of onions. If you're not lucky, you learn how to sleep curled around a spinning wheel while someone snores directly into your forehead. Now and then, someone leaves. An older son marries and starts his own household, but not too far away, because you still need help in the fields. A daughter becomes a servant in a richer home. She sends a chicken back every feast day. You call that success. But mostly people come into your home. The sick, the poor, the politically useful. And you don't ask for privacy, because you've forgotten what that is. You whisper secrets through woven baskets. You cry behind the storage jars. You hold hands under the dinner table and hope no one notices. And when someone dies, you just shift over and make room for someone new. Even the church gets involved. They might send a boy to train as a clerk, or a widow who needs shelter, or a traveling friar who eats everything and leaves you with 3 extra prayers to say. You're not just a family. You're a small, chaotic economy. Labor, food, and survival move through your home in waves, and everyone contributes something, even if that something is just lice. Because yes, you all have them. Lice in your braids, fleas in your bedding, mites in the straw. You can boil your tunics and scrub your scalp with vinegar. Doesn't matter. They come back. They always come back. You learn to ignore the itching unless it's really bad. And then you ask your step-niece's apprentice to check your hair. She'll nod solemnly, pull out a comb, and tell you stories while she works. You'll do the same for her next week. Because that's what family is. Shared burdens, shared space, shared infestations. You may not all love each other, but you all eat the same stew. You all survive the same winters. You all hope the roof holds one more season. And when the fire is low and the snoring is loud, you glance around the room and think, I don't know how half these people got here, but they're yours, in all their itchy, opinionated, borrowed blanket glory. And tomorrow, someone else might arrive. There's always room, somewhere. It starts with a cough, nothing dramatic, just a dry little bark from the corner bed. You pause, stir the soup, and listen for a second one. There it is. And just like that, you're in quarantine. Not the kind with doctors and charts and color-coded warning systems. No, this is the medieval version. You isolate the blanket, move the water jug, whisper a prayer. The fire is stoked hotter. Everyone avoids the shared cup. And suddenly, no one wants to sleep next to Uncle Thomas. He says he's fine. But his color's off. His breath smells like iron. And no one's seen him eat in 2 days. You all know what's coming. Because people die at home. Hospitals, if they exist near you at all, are for the already dead, the nobility, or the spiritually doomed. The rest of you? You die in the bed you were born in, or if you're unlucky, on the floor next to it. There's a rhythm to it, a process. You've seen it before. The sick person is cared for until they stop talking. Then they're surrounded with rosary beads, a priest if one's available, and family members muttering about the will. Someone starts baking, someone else starts digging. And within 48 hours, often less, they're in the ground. Burial plots are often just behind the house, sometimes near the churchyard, sometimes in the churchyard if your family was important enough or paid enough. No embalming, no marble monuments, just linen, a prayer, and dirt. And then comes the bed, the same bed you weren't allowed to touch while they were still breathing. The same bed they clutched through fevered nights and muttered prayers. Now it's empty, and your back has been killing you for months on that straw pallet by the hearth. So you move in, slowly, respectfully, kind of. You fluff the mattress, which doesn't help, and try not to think about how warm it still is. You lay your own blanket over the old one. You light a little sage if you can afford it. If not, you just open a window and hope for the best. You don't mention it out loud, but everyone knows. The cough took someone out, and you got their bed. It's a win if you ignore the smell. Because the truth is, disease doesn't just take the old, or the weak, or the strangers. It takes whoever's unlucky enough to catch it at the wrong time. A cold becomes a fever. A fever becomes sweating sickness, or consumption, or the plague. If things are going particularly badly this season, you try not to be near sick people, but your whole house is people. There's no such thing as isolation when you share a bucket. when the same ladle feeds 10 mouths, when the chamber pot lives under the same bed where the coughing just started. Death is not a stranger. It's not even a guest. It's part of the family. It attends your meals in silence. It waits in the corners. It follows after harvest, after childbirth, after a neighbor visits with just a bit of a chill. And you grieve, but not too long, because someone has to feed the animals. Someone has to rehang the door. Someone has to check if that mold on the wall is growing teeth. Your mourning is short, practical, a candle, a prayer, a changed seating arrangement. You keep going, because you must, even if the blanket smells like illness, even if you still hear their voice in your sleep, even if you're secretly coughing too. Because here's the thing about medieval family life. It doesn't stop. Not for grief, not for fear, not for the empty space in the bed beside you. And when your time comes, when you're the cough no one wants to name, someone will tuck your body into that same mattress, and someone else will boil the soup and stir it in silence. And maybe your niece will get your bed, and maybe she'll sleep in it with one eye open, because it still smells like you. You don't remember the first time you were taught the rules, because no one tells you exactly. They're shown, demonstrated, whispered, stitched into the hem of your tunic, carved into the bench you sit on, folded into every mealtime, every prayer, every silence. You learn by watching. The boys get noise. They run, shout, scrape their knees. They chase pigs and swing sticks like swords. Their shoes are scuffed. Their futures are vast. No one tells them to be smaller. The girls learn stillness. You learn how to sew before you can spell your own name. You learn to carry a pot without spilling, to fold your hands during prayer, to make your eyes quiet. A loud girl is a warning sign. You're praised when you serve others. You're praised when you smile. You're praised when you don't ask questions, and punished when you do. Not always with a beating, though that happens. Sometimes it's just a look, a refusal, a silence sharper than any slap. Modesty, they say. Modesty is a virtue. So you learn to disappear inside your own body. You cross your ankles. You lower your voice. You keep secrets you never wanted. The boys, they're praised for fighting. They are encouraged to puff their chests, to speak boldly, to win. Even when there's nothing to win. They learn how to swing a blade before they learn how to hold a quill. They are rewarded for anger, respected for stubbornness. And when they cry, they are told not to. Men don't cry, so they don't. Instead, they grow hard in the places that should have stayed soft. And girls are told they're soft by nature, made for nurturing, made for service. You hear it in your mother's sigh when she braids your hair tight, in your aunt's hands as she shows you how to sew a straight seam, in your older sister's silence after the neighbor boy visits uninvited. No one explains, but you understand. You're being trained. You are a daughter, and therefore a future wife, a future mother, a future disappointment if you stray too far. You embroider your obedience into linens. You fold your fear into the firewood stack. The household is your teacher. Even the furniture has something to say. The table reminds you to serve. The hearth reminds you to stay. The bed reminds you that privacy is earned and usually denied. And when you step out of line, correction is swift. Maybe it's a slipper across the legs. Maybe it's kneeling in the cold to pray away your pride. Maybe it's 3 days without supper and a long lecture about your cousin who married at 14 and never complained. You get the message. The world inside this house has rules, rules written not on paper, but in behavior. repetition, glances, absence, and those rules are carved deep. A boy who cries is mocked. A girl who runs is scolded. A servant who speaks out of turn is reminded that his place is beneath the beam, not beside it. Even the stories you're told reinforce the code. Saints who obeyed, wives who endured, martyrs who suffered with grace. You try to model yourself after them, but sometimes your hands shake. Sometimes your thoughts go places they shouldn't. You wonder what would happen if you shouted, if you threw the needle across the room, if you kissed someone you weren't supposed to. You don't, because that's not what girls do. And the boys, they have their own burdens. They are told to lead, provide, dominate. They are never allowed to be small or uncertain. They grow up with expectations pressed into their skin like bruises, told they are the future, whether they want to be or not. You envy them sometimes, until you see the fear behind their eyes when they fail. Because failure, too, has a gendered script, and there is no mercy in it. So you both follow the script. Girls in silence, boys in noise, and the household keeps teaching, even when no one speaks. The cracked bowl says, endure. The worn broom says, serve. The locked chest says, not yours. And so you learn. You learn that obedience is safer than honesty. That modesty means never saying no, but also never saying yes. That power lives somewhere else, outside this room, outside your skin. And if you're lucky, one day you'll pass the same lessons down to daughters who will fold napkins and lower their eyes, to sons who will shout until someone listens, and the house will keep teaching, long after you're gone. By now you understand, family isn't hugs and heirlooms, it's buckets and bread. It's who milks the goat, who sweeps the floor, and who takes the blame when the porridge burns. In the medieval world, family is your workforce, your safety net, your branding. You are born into a name, or more accurately, into someone's debt, someone's marriage arrangement, someone's labor shortage. And from the day you can carry a stool or fetch kindling, you contribute. Affection? Sometimes. Loyalty? Often. But not unconditionally. Because family here isn't built on shared dreams or heartwarming fireplace chats. It's built on survival. Your father doesn't read you stories at night. He teaches you how to trap rabbits or pay the tithe on time. Your mother doesn't ask about your feelings. She shows you how to salt fish, cure fever, and handle grief without flinching. Your siblings are not your best friends. They're your rivals. For inheritance, for attention, for the last piece of bread at the bottom of the pot. But also, your allies. Because when the roof leaks, it's a sister who catches the water. When the tax collector comes, it's a brother who hides the coins. Family is both the rope that ties you together and the weight that drags you down. It's who you labor beside, who you bury, who you marry off to someone with slightly more pigs. When the harvest fails, it's family who helps you stretch the flour, and when the rumor spreads, it's family who either defends your name or spreads it further. Because reputation matters. You are not just you. You are your father's daughter, your husband's wife, your uncle's ward. Your mistakes aren't personal. They're communal. If you flirt with the wrong boy, your sister might be punished. If your brother commits theft, your whole household might pay the fine. And so, everyone watches, everyone disciplines, everyone gossips. The family is your surveillance system and your shield. It is obligation, dressed up as love. You share one loaf of bread between 6 people and call that dinner. You sacrifice for each other and call it duty. You keep each other alive and call it affection, even if you barely speak. Sometimes you do love them, deeply, silently, through actions more than words. You wipe your father's brow when he's ill. You fix your brother's shoe. You hold your mother's hand when she prays for rain. But other times, love has nothing to do with it. You get married because it's expected. You stay because you have no choice. You serve because no one else will. And if one of you dies, someone else just takes their place. Not because they were unloved, but because life doesn't pause. Not here. Not when there are animals to feed, shirts to mend, fires to keep alive. Family, in the end, is function. It's how you survive winters, raise children, pay debts, bury the dead, and keep the land from falling into someone else's hands. And still, somehow, it's sacred. Not because it's soft, but because it's the one thing that stays. When crops fail, when illness comes, when neighbors whisper and priests scold and walls collapse, family remains. Sometimes that means love. Sometimes that means resentment, bruises, gossip, and meals in silence. But always, it means together, not by choice, not always, but by necessity. And in a world like this, where privacy is fiction and comfort is rare, necessity is enough. Enough to mourn, enough to forgive, enough to share your lice and your last egg. So you keep going. You teach your daughters the same lessons. You expect your sons to carry on the name, the work, the weight. And they will, because they were raised to. And one day, when the fire's low and your knees ache and someone is crying in the corner bed, you'll close your eyes and think, this is family. Not perfect, not kind, but here, still here. You did everything right today. You rose before the sun, hauled the water, fed the animals, kept the fire going, said all the right things to all the wrong people. You folded the laundry. You didn't complain. You even remembered to bless the bread before breaking it. You endured, which, in this time and place, is the most anyone can do. And now, you lie down on your lumpy hay mattress, the same one you share with your sibling, your neighbor's cousin, and a cat that definitely isn't yours. You adjust your wool blanket, scratch behind your ear. Yes, it's fleas again. Ignore the snoring. Try to find a spot that isn't damp. The hearth is still glowing. The smoke still clings to everything, your clothes, your hair, your lungs. But you're inside, you're fed, you're alive. You close your eyes, surrounded by relatives, smells, and the faint sense that someone's watching you. Probably your aunt, who sleeps with one eye open and dreams in judgment. Outside, the wind howls, the door creaks, someone's goat bleats in protest. Inside, your sister mumbles in her sleep. Someone coughs, you hold your breath. Probably nothing, hopefully nothing. If you're lucky, tomorrow is a feast day. There might be music, a roasted bird, a little ale. If you're very lucky, no one will start a rumor. No one will fall sick. No one will demand you marry the miller's son before sunset. But that's for tomorrow. For now, you sleep, with your hands aching and your back sore and your thoughts trailing off mid-sentence. Because this is what medieval family life looks like. Not fair, not easy, not especially sweet, but still, home. So good night, medieval you. Rest while you can. Because in a world like this, the simple act of surviving the day is a kind of miracle. And in the silence that follows before the rooster begins again, you've earned your sleep. And when history forgets you, which it will, you'll leave behind nothing but ashes, straw, and silence. But maybe not here. Subscribe, and let the algorithm carry your name further than the grave ever did.